I need to tell you something that kept me awake for 3 nights straight. 3 nights where I sat alone in my home office, staring at documents that felt like they were burning holes through my desk. The fluorescent light humming overhead, my hands trembling as I turned each page. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Should I share this? Would it change everything, or would it destroy everything? I decided you deserve to know the truth, because what I'm about to describe isn't speculation or theory. It's documented, it's classified, and it's undeniably, terrifyingly real. And they already know I'm talking to you. 6 months ago, a source I've worked with for nearly a decade reached out. This isn't someone on the fringe. This person has clearance levels most Americans don't even know exist. And when they contacted me, trembling through encrypted messages, I could feel the fear. The careful wording, the deliberate pauses between sentences. The weight of what they were about to tell me, I knew immediately. This was different. This was something real, something dangerous. What they described stopped my heart cold. According to multiple corroborating documents, classified documents, a meeting took place. Not between world leaders, not some diplomatic summit. A meeting between representatives of the United States government, including individuals directly connected to the Trump administration and beings they described internally as Nordic-type extraterrestrials. Tall, pale-skinned, blue-eyed, humanoid in every measurable way, yet fundamentally, unmistakably not human, not from here. I felt ridiculous typing that sentence the first time. I deleted it. I rewrote it. I deleted it again. Then I looked back at the documentation, really looked at it, and I typed it one final time because the evidence demanded that I do. And once you see the evidence, once you hold it in your hands, feel its weight, ridiculous becomes irrelevant. Truth doesn't care if it sounds impossible. Truth simply is. Here's what matters. This wasn't a Trump-specific event. The groundwork was laid years earlier, across multiple administrations, quietly, deliberately. The Nordics, as classified intelligence documents refer to them, had been making contact incrementally. Years of sustained communication. Frequency-based signals that took years to decode, to understand. By the time this administration entered the picture, the conversation had already begun. This meeting wasn't an opening. It was the culmination of a long, secret dialogue, and they're still talking. When I read the description of that actual encounter, I had to stand up. I paced for 20 minutes, maybe longer, because my brain refused to process it calmly. Refused. The Nordics arrived without any conventional landing. Witnesses described a localized atmospheric distortion, a shimmer like heat off summer asphalt, except it was cold. Impossibly, wrongly cold. And then they were simply there. 3 of them, standing in a room full of humans who'd prepared for months, and were still, despite everything, completely unprepared. The emotional response in that room was overwhelming. Hardened intelligence officers, men trained to suppress reaction, reportedly wept without understanding why. Others felt a sensation of profound peace, as though every anxious thought they'd ever carried had been set down simultaneously. One senior official had to be guided to a chair because his legs stopped working entirely. Not from fear, from something far more like awe so complete it became physically incapacitating. This wasn't terror. This was transcendence. The communication wasn't verbal in any traditional sense. Translators stood present, yes, but the Nordics had apparently developed something far more sophisticated, the capacity to transmit concepts directly. Raw impressions, visual images, emotional information flowing without friction. And the spoken words came afterward, almost as a formality, a courtesy. They could place ideas directly into human consciousness. Knowledge transferring without language. Without loss, without distortion. This is technology that fundamentally rewrites everything we thought we understood about consciousness itself. Everything. What they communicated was warning and offer combined. The warning, humanity's relationship with its own technology, artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation. Civilizations reaching our threshold face a convergence point, a moment where species either integrate advancement with wisdom or fragment catastrophically. They'd watched this happen before. To others, they were here because our convergence point approaches faster than our social evolution can match. And they're already talking. Without us, I sat with that information for days. Turned it over. The implications, if true, are staggering. Every argument we have becomes meaningless. Politics, economics, culture wars, elections. Children squabbling over a toy in a burning building. Everything we thought mattered suddenly doesn't. The real question isn't left versus right. It's whether we survive the next 20 years at all. The offer was far more complicated than anyone imagined. And this is the part that explains why governments actively suppress this information. The Nordics offered what my source described, with careful precision, as graduated disclosure of knowledge. Advanced technology, medical understanding, physics that would eliminate energy scarcity entirely. They're willing to share it. But the conditions attached, the prerequisites, are conditions no government on Earth is willing to meet publicly. Because meeting them would require a fundamental, irreversible restructuring of how power operates on this planet. The knowledge transfer demands transparent, equitable global distribution, not nation-state advantage, not corporate ownership, universal access to everything. The Nordics, whether by intention or consequence of their ethics, handed Earth's governments a gift they cannot unwrap. Because the entire architecture of geopolitical power is built on controlling superior resources, superior knowledge. Monopoly is the engine, the mechanism, and they've made monopoly impossible. They've broken the lever, and that's why we don't know. Because the governments who have made contact, and my source confirms at minimum 4 nations beyond America, cannot absorb this technology without dismantling themselves. They hide it, they classify it, they discredit anyone who gets close. While we argue about irrelevant things, they're already in underground rooms, continuing conversations we're not meant to hear. The truth would change everything, and they know it. I felt angry when I finally understood this. Genuinely, deeply angry in a way I haven't felt about a story in years. The people making this decision, to hide, to suppress, to manage, they made it for us. They decided we couldn't handle it. The political risk, the economic disruption, the existential shock was too dangerous. They may not be entirely wrong about the shock, but being right doesn't give them the right to choose for 8 billion people indefinitely. There's a difference, a profound physical difference, between believing something in theory and holding proof in your hands. The second one changes you at a cellular level. I spent 3 days barely sleeping, barely eating, after I read these documents. 3 days of questioning whether releasing this truth would make me responsible for the psychological devastation that follows. 3 days where I realized that's the exact argument governments have always used to justify silence. And I understood then I couldn't let that argument stop me anymore. My source is safe. I need you to hear that clearly because what comes next cannot be unheard. I've taken every precaution I know how to take. Beyond that, I've accepted a hard truth. Some information has a momentum of its own once it starts moving. We're at that point now. Once this is said, it cannot be unsaid. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And I accept that responsibility fully. I'm choosing to tell you this because you deserve the choice to know what I know. What I want you to do after hearing this, and I need you to listen carefully, is not panic and it's not dismiss it as fantasy. What I want you to do is ask. Ask your representatives. Ask your journalists directly. Ask the question loudly enough, persistently enough, in enough places that the cost of silence finally, inevitably exceeds the cost of truth. Make them deeply uncomfortable. Force them to choose, defend transparency or defend the lie. The choice is theirs now. Because somewhere beneath us, in a room we've never been shown, behind doors we're not permitted to approach, the most important conversation in human history has already begun. Right now, while you're watching, while people argue about politics and economics and culture wars, the conversation is happening. The beings from another world are talking to representatives of our governments. They're making decisions, laying down conditions, reshaping everything we thought we understood about our place in the universe. And we weren't invited. We don't even know what they're asking for. What happens next depends entirely on us, on whether we accept this hidden knowledge or demand full inclusion in what's being decided. On whether governments feel the pressure, real, undeniable pressure, to finally integrate this into public discourse. The Nordics, based on what my source relayed, seem willing to accelerate disclosure if conditions align, if enough humans know, if demand becomes impossible to ignore. The timeline isn't fixed. It depends on how loudly, how urgently we ask. They're already talking without us. They're already talking. Without you, in rooms you'll never see, the most important conversation in human history is unfolding. Right now, you weren't invited, but I'm inviting you, not to panic, not to believe blindly, to stay aware, to ask questions, demand answers, recognize the truth. The only way you get a voice in that room is being loud enough, aware enough, demanding enough on the surface. The conversation has begun. What world you wake up in depends on what you do with what you now know.